Moshe, it's 4 o'clock. Would you like to go ahead and get started?
Yes, we can get started.
All right, well, I welcome everyone to today's talk. My name is Joe Warren. I'm a professor in the Department of Computer Science here at Rice. And I'll also have the pleasure of moderating the questions and the answers at the end of the talk. The chat is turned off, and so the way we'd like to handle questions and answers is there's a Q&A button at the bottom. You can submit your questions during the talk, and then at the end of the talk, then we'll work through as many of the questions as we have time for Moshe to answer. So I'd like to introduce today's speaker. He's a university professor at Rice. He's also the George Distinguished Service Professor in Computational Engineering. He's been an author and a co-author of over 700 papers, as well as 2 books. He's the recipient of several scientific awards, a fellow of multiple societies, and a member of several different academies. He holds 7 honorary doctorates, and he's the senior editor of the Communications of the ACM, the premier publication in computing focusing on societal impact of information technology. I'd like to introduce my colleague and friend, Moshe Vardi.
Thank you, Joe, for this kind introduction. And thank you all for joining me this afternoon for a very important conversation about Rice University in 2021, lesson for the 2nd century. The triggering event for this lecture is the presidential transition. Melissa Keane, who knows more about the Rice history than anyone else probably in the world, wrote in her blog Rice History Corner on July 30 of this year. She wrote, the transition of presidential administration always prompts re-evaluation of the institution's future, especially of our mission and how to best pursue it. But I think this succession has been very rushed, and I have not seen us engage in such re-evaluation. The closest we came to such re-evaluation was the email that was sent by Mr. Rob Ladd, the chair of the Board of Trustees, on May 26, in which he announced his succession. He listed, he had a long list of what he considered to be the accomplishment of Rice during 2004 to 2021. Increased selectivity, increased internationalization, growth in the number of students, increased diversity, the Rice investment, growth of research portfolio, growth of faculty, new research initiative, extensive new construction, emphasis on the role of the arts, engage with Houston, and growth of the endowment. But I must admit that when I read this email, it read not as a self-evaluation, but essentially as a PR piece written by Allen Center. And then I read in July of this year, I read an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education by Lee Winsel, whose title was Marketing and PR Corrupting University. And the argument is that universities should pursue the language of truth, and the language of hype violates the language of truth. So this talk will be a critical examination of Rice in 2021. To prepare this talk, I've made a list of about 25 people whom I interviewed. I followed the Chatham House rules, in which everybody was, I'm not going to tell you who are these people, and I will not cite anybody explicitly, Chatham House rule. This talk is not meant to be a substitute for a thorough self-study. As far as I know, the last thorough self-study was done under Bill Gordon, who was then the provost of Rice. It was done in the early 80s. Here you see Bill Gordon. He passed about a decade ago. I do not believe that Rice has done a self-study since then. So it's time for Rice to do a self-study. Now, why me? Why am I doing this kind of a self-study? Well, one way to look at it is it takes a little bit of chutzpah to give such a talk. And chutzpah is one thing that Israelis do not like. for better or worse. On a more jocular side, in 2015, a group of people from engineering went to visit IBM Austin Research Lab. And they gave us a demo of Watson. And Jan Odegaard asked Watson, who is Moshe Vardi? And Watson's answer was, Moshe Vardi is Rice University. Everybody, of course, fell on the floor laughing. I took a picture because I thought this is such a amusing anecdote. But Watson was not completely off, because I think the connection between Rice and me is much deeper than most people would realize. First, I was a Rice parent before I became a Rice faculty member. In fact, that's how I ended up at Rice, was I followed my son to Rice. I've been at Rice for 28 years. Some people have been longer than me. Alan Matuso, probably close to around 50 years, maybe plus. But here are the things that people do not know. My great doctoral advisor, Shmuel Agmon, Israeli mathematician, did his postdoc at Rice in the 1950s. His advisor, Sholem Mandelbrot, who was the uncle of Benoit Mandelbrot, who is famous for fractals. Sholem was a Jewish French mathematician who escaped Paris during World War II and sought shelter at Rice. How did he end up coming to Rice? It was because his advisor, Jacques Adamard, a well-known Jewish French algebraist, he attended Rice laying of the cornerstone in 1911. So my route at Rice goes all the way back to the very, very beginning. You can say that this is kismet, destiny, how I ended up at Rice. As I mentioned, I will be critical. Why critical? I want to quote a conversation I had with Brian Patterson, a member of the board, in 2017. And I asked him what happens, he was a professional football player, and asked him what happens after a game that your team wins, not after the game your team loses, after a game your team wins. And Brian said 95% of their focus was on our mistakes. They wanted to make us better. To make us better, they need to focus on correcting mistakes. So criticizing, correcting mistake, this is how we learn. Paraphrasing Barack Obama, I can say, you don't just wish for a better Rice, you have to fight for it. This talk is my fighting for a better Rice. So I'm going to start by reviewing the claimed accomplishments. Not all of them, but most of them. So the first one will be engage with Houston. The Houston Chronicle wrote an editorial in 2 days about after Mr. Ladd wrote his email. The Houston Chronicle came up with an editorial, and the headline for the editorial was more consequential and more Houston. And it mentioned examples such as Center for Civic Leadership, the Kinner Institute for Urban Research, the ION located on Main, who will be the anchor of the Houston innovation ecosystem. And I have to say, I completely agree with Mr. Ladd and with Houston Chronicle that Rice has become much more Houston over the last 17 years. And this is indeed a major accomplishment. I will come back later to the ION to express some concerns, but overall, I think this is a major accomplishment to engage more with Houston. Now let's talk about the Rice investments. So the essence of the Rice investment is the students whose family was under 65,000 income get all their costs covered, including fees, room, and board. Those with an income between 65 to 130,000 will attend without paying tuition, and there are more details that I will not get into here. This is a fantastic program, but we must remember it was necessitated by the dramatic rise in Rice costs over the past 30 years. When I came to Rice, I believe tuition was maybe $5,000. A website, smartassets.com, calculate what's called College Education Value Index, and they take into account tuition and financial aid and debt load, and as well as future income. their indexes, the school that does the best under this value index is MIT, so they give MIT 100%. Stanford is 79%, 89%. Rice is 73%, rank 15, to my surprise, behind CMU at 78%. Rice used to be clearly in the top 10 in terms of value. So I think we need to take a look and to see, we should be very proud of the Rice investment, but we should not lose track that we used to be much better at value than we are now. Another accomplishment is centennial campaign, and it was really impressive. Rice has raised $1.1 billion. I was disappointed, however, by the report on the accomplishments of the campaign. This slide, as far as I could see, was the only report that was given to the faculty. Just this slide, this pie chart. I've asked then, can we get a more detailed report on how the campaign, the centennial campaign, has benefited the Brown School of Engineering? There was no response to that, and I will come back to that later. Mr. Ladd mentioned extensive new construction. There's no doubt we have seen extensive new construction on campus. Some buildings are very consequential. For example, the Broxton Pavilion is widely considered to be a very important contribution to Rice's internal life. This is the pavilion, and it has become a very central place, central location at Rice. Other buildings, less consequential. For example, the Brockman Hall, the Opera House, is considered to be a huge investment in a small program. So we have extensive new construction, but the picture is a bit nuanced between consequential buildings and less consequential buildings. But we also have to remember this distinction between buildings and programs. Buildings are shells, programs are content. Mr. Ladd has mentioned in his email many programs. Skinner Institute, I think very successful. Neuroengineering, very successful. Data Science Initiative. I was part of a team that wrote the proposal for the Data Science Initiative, and we were all disappointed and underwhelmed by the success of the Data Science Initiative. The Wells Institute, I would say work in progress. Many faculty have expressed major concerns about the way the program is being shaped. Moody Center, again, I'm not an expert. People tell me beautiful building, underfunded programs. So as you look through this, you find two keys that are crucial to success: adequate funding of programs and faculty-driven versus Allen Center-driven. You must let the faculty use its vision to develop these programs. Another way to look at it is donor-driven versus need-driven. So there is a classical dilemma in management theory. It's called the agency dilemma. And this dilemma, here is a quote, this dilemma exists in circumstances where agents are motivated to act in their own best interests, which are contrary to those of their principals. So let's take a look. What is development rewarded for? Development gets its brownie points for dollars raised, not for needs met. And we need to remember, at the end of the day, it's not about dollars raised, it's about needs met. And the question is, can Rice say no to donors? And I'll just mention here two examples that are mentioned when I talk to people around campus, and I said, which program or projects have been donor-driven versus need-driven? The two that are mentioned, again, this is not an extensive study, but the two that are mentioned most often are the Brockman Hall and the Dorr Center, both a donor-driven versus need-driven. The campaign was described, the Centennial campaign was described by the Vice President for Development as centrally driven. So the Centennial campaign was described as centrally driven. What does it mean? There was no campus-wide pre-campaign need assessment. The needs, the directions of the campaign was all driven from Allen Center. And I will come back to this point. Let's talk about the endowment. Again, Mr. Ladd mentioned the endowment now exceeds $7 billion, more than double the $3.3 billion when David took over as president. So from 3.3 to 7, that sounds very impressive, almost more than double. But if we look at the endowment, we have to consider other factors. We have to consider debt and inflation. So if we go to 2004, we take the investment, there was very modest level of debt, $200 million. So when you take the net endowment and you use an inflation calculator, you get $4.6 billion of the net endowment. You go to 2020, the endowment has gone up to 6.8, but the debt has gone up by almost $1 billion. So the net endowment is $5.7 billion. When you put it all together, the net real annual rate of return is 1.4%. Just for comparison, I say is 1.4, is it good or bad? I look at other schools, Brown, 2.6%, Northwestern, 4.0%. So 1.4% is nothing to write home about. Now, I realize that the numbers I have here are 2020 numbers. And no doubt, the endowment 2020, June 2020 was a bad period. We just, the crisis of COVID, endowment was down. I'm sure that now it is up. I would probably guess that the endowment by the end of the fiscal year, when the numbers come out, I'm guessing will be around $8 billion. But my comparison to Brown and Northwestern was about the 2020 numbers. And so if Rice would go up from 1.4, I'm confident that so will be the numbers at Brown and in Northwestern. I should also emphasize this is not a comment about the endowment, because I'm doing an overall, the endowment can be managed, there is a drawdown rate, there is a debt level. This is really a statement about Rice balance sheets rather than the endowment per se. But I think just saying that endowment has more than doubled is too narrow lens to look at this picture. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to look at the numbers for research awards and examine them in depth. Again, Mr. Ladd, research awards have gone from 72 million in 2004 to 170.5 in 2020. Again, more than double, very impressive it seems. And indeed, in the set of the university address in the fall of 2020, this slide was presented and it shows the rise. The numbers are slightly different, but essentially a rise from $74 million in fiscal year 2004 to 170.5 million in fiscal year 2020. But if you look more carefully, you see that the major growth has been in the blue stripe, which is university own investment in research. The state funding has increased because of the introduction of CPRIT, major increase in foundation funding, but I want to look at the federal R&D because that's very often used as a measure of the competitiveness of, especially of science and engineering. So if we go to 2005, where I can find numbers, then I found $55 million of federal program revenue, it's called. This is from what's called NCSS, National Center for Science, Engineering, Statistics. It's a center run by NSF. If you do the inflation calculation, this is $73 million in 2020 real dollars. And federal program revenue in 2020 is $74 million. This is from the Office of Institutional Research at Rice University. So it seems there was really no growth in federal R&D as far as I can see. And I find it either puzzling or something to have some room for anxiety here, because as far as I can see, the size of the science engineering faculty has gone by 20% during this period. So we'd expect to see a significant increase in federal program revenue, and I do not see it. There's also another question when you look at this number, which is how, even if funding has increased, why was it increased? So when Jim Coleman he was at Rice. He was vice provost for research for 5 years. When he left, he also talked about the impressive growth in research funding. And I asked him then, Jim, but what did your office do to bring about such an increase? Can you tell me what are the concrete steps that your office has taken to make this increase? He said, good question, I'll get back to you. And he was very honest. He came back to me about a year later, said it wasn't my office. It was a demographic change in science and engineering. The faculty got younger and more aggressive and more vigorous, and that brought about the increase. So it's not enough to say there's been an increase. Part of the question is, how did this increase come about? And here, in fact, I can see no real increase in real dollars. Another way to look at it is to look at the numbers to say what percentage of an agency is Rice able to bring? So we can look at different agencies. For example, you look at NSF, and you see in 2005 we had 0.71%. It went a little down in 2011, and then it came back in 2019, which are the last numbers we have, to 0.64. So I would say NSF funding, I'll call it flat. NIH funding, again, you see we started 0.06, we went to 0.076, and then we went down. I would again say essentially flat, but you can see that NSF, in terms of NIH funding at Rice, is rather small. And in fact, you look at comparable schools without medical schools, Rice should be able to do much better in NIH funding. Room for anxiety here, that you look at DOE funding, it has gone down, and DOD funding has gone down. So I think the picture about federal research funding at Rice is much more nuanced and not necessarily something we should brag about. In fact, there is a University of Massachusetts Amherst has a Center for Measuring University Performance, and they give lots of data and ranking about public and private university. And the last data they have is for 2017-18. So Rice shines in median SAT and endowment. And I think it's without question that Rice undergraduate program is top rated. And I'm saying it also as a faculty member, as a parent, and all the different rankings that come up, always we have a top rated undergraduate program. But when you look at the strength of the university in terms of research, it's again, we shouldn't necessarily brag about it. So when you look at federal research, we were ranked number 42, while in 2004 we ranked number 43. So essentially flat. And I have to say, I cannot make sense of Rice numbers. It looks to me like these are self-reported numbers. And to me, it looks as if I might be wrong, and I don't want to say anything categorical, but it looks as if Rice's numbers seem somewhat overstated. This deserves further examination. Same story when you come to total research. Total research, Rice can go up because it can invest more of its own money in total research. Again, we moved very modestly from 44th place to the 40th place. Academy members, again, we move very, very modestly from 27th place to 24th place. Faculty award, we decline precipitously. This is really something that I think we need to do something about. Postdocs, nothing, again, no change, no significant change. PhDs, production, no significant change. In fact, the recent just came out that the Times Higher Education ranking for the US, and Rice ranked in the 46th place. But again, our undergraduate program pulls us up. If we were just to be ranked by the strength of our graduate and research program, we would be lucky to be in the top 50. So I think the US News and World Report that portrays us as a top 20 university is misleading us to ignore the weakness on the research side. Now, what's interesting is to look at our research performance compared to the endowment. So here is a couple of ways of doing it. You can take the endowment and divide it by the number of research students we have. And I took somewhat arbitrarily, PhDs plus half the number of postdocs. Rice has $20 million per student. Stanford has $14 million. Brown has $11 million. So that is to say that relative to our endowment, the number of research students we have is low. You can look at it from the other end. You can take Rice research expenditures and divide them by the endowment. And I guess Rice, again, I didn't want to belabor here with numbers. Rice research expenditure to endowment ratio is very low compared to some peers. And so, yes, we have a very large endowment. The real question is, how do we deploy it? What do we do with it? And this is a question of budget versus strategic priorities, and I will come back to this issue. Now, another accomplishment was mentioned was growing the student body. So in 2004, we had 3,000. 2020, we had about 4,000. And the plan is in 2025 to have 4,800. We're going to build one more college. I don't quite understand the arithmetics of how we're going to number of students will increase by 1/3 when you build one college. It means higher density for the existing colleges, I'm guessing. And this is something that worth looking to see what will it do, again, to Rice culture. I'll come to it in a minute. When Rice described the plans for increase, they wrote, here I'm quoting from Rice press releases, higher enrollment will help Rice not only continue developing a more diverse and dynamic environment on campus, but will also add more faculty members strategically recruited for specific objective in teaching and research. I will come back to these bold-faced phrases. And Rice wrote, we must undertake this expansion carefully in order to ensure that we retain the best aspects of Rice culture, student experience, and sense of community. Now let's examine it somewhat critically. So I have to say, I'm on the fence whether this is a good thing or not a good thing. I'd like to understand what are the guiding principles for growth. So far I have not seen much. Why stop at 4,800? Are we going to continue to grow? What has been the impact so far on the best aspects of Rice culture, student experience, and sense of community? What are these best aspects? Are the metrics? Have we evaluated how we have done with the previous growth to make sure that we did okay? And what are the plans for the next growth? I can tell you from my somewhat narrow perspective in the Brown School of Engineering, I'll come back to it. For example, class sizes have become clearly larger. So if one of the best aspects of Rice was a small student to faculty ratio and small classes, we clearly have gone down on this. And classroom size is a hard resource. I mean, it's not, when we have buildings, it's not so easy to make the classroom larger. In computer science, it's a bit easy, but in departments in engineering and sciences that have labs, dealing with growth is a major challenge. And I'll come back to the School of Engineering. Now, one argument for the growth that it leads to improved diversity. And again, this is a chart from the university address in fall 2020. And this picture was shown and was described as remarkable progress in diversity. Remarkable progress. So let's take a closer look. For Black students, we went from 6.9 to 8.1. That's a 17% growth in their percentage. I would call it very modest growth. For Hispanic, we went from 11.5 to 17.4, 51% growth. I think that's good growth. For Asian, it has been a remarkable growth. And this is something that people can debate. For example, Richard Tapia he said, Rice demographics do not reflect what is beyond the hedges. So this is something that I think we need to consider. Rice demographics do not reflect what is beyond the hedges. We also need to remember that 12% of Rice undergraduate students are international, but I think this group is not necessarily diverse. This is something, again, to pay attention to the lack of diversity among international students. In 2020, about a year ago, I wrote a column in a professional magazine where have all the domestic graduate students gone? And I commented on the fact that according to NSF, 80% of graduate students, computer science engineering programs are international students. In fact, at Rice, 53% of PhD students in all disciplines are international, the majority. I concluded my column, we should welcome international graduate students because they enrich our graduate programs. I love my international students, not because they sustain our graduate programs. I'm afraid we are in the sustained territory here. If you look at Rice in general and the Brown School of Engineering, we have a huge income stream coming from the People's Republic of China. A back of the envelope calculation that if you take that income and you consider it as an endowment, it is as if somewhere around $750 million investment in China. I view it as a very risky investment. I mean, here are two couple of headlines from the newspaper. In China, the dream of an American education loses some of its gleam. Just from a few days ago, in a bid to counter China's move in the Pacific, the US and Britain will help Australia deploy nuclear-powered submarine. China is emerging as a major geopolitical, I don't want to say adversary, but at least a competitor for the United States. And to have such a large interest in coming from China, I think it is simply very risky. Now let's talk about the faculty. Remember, one of the arguments for growing the size of the student body was to enable to increase the size of the faculty. So again, Mr. Ladd, the chair of the board of trustees, the faculty has grown from 579 FTEs in fall 2004 to 748 in fall 2020. So we had 30% growth in the student body and 30% growth in the faculty, in the size of the faculty. So you think, okay, 30% and another 30%, that makes sense, that is reasonable. But if you dig in, you see that for tenure track faculty members, the increase was 15%. So what happened here? We have 15% increase in tenure track versus 30% increase overall faculty. And the answer is that the other increase come in entities, and it's a major increase. It's 140% growth in the number of entities on campus. So the fact that we are going from having more and more entities on campus, and we have great entities that are great instructor, but it is changing the character of Rice. The profile of Rice education is changing because of that. At Rice, 35% now of the faculty is entities. When you look at peers, we are on the high end. Brown is 25%, Princeton is 22%. Now, here is during this period, where the faculty grew by 30%, and much of the growth was with entities, the budget in real dollar has grown by over 50%. And total compensation has grown in real dollars in 60%. So where does all the money go? And the answer is it must go to the administrative side of the university. And I think this is a major concern. And I will come back to this issue of admin-driven university in a few minutes. Now, I want to focus a little bit on the Brown School of Engineering, because this picture overall does not show what happened school by school. In the School of Engineering, the number of students taking our classes has doubled between 2004 and 2017. The faculty at that point has grown by about from 95 to 130, so by about 30+%. That means the students to faculty ratio has gone from 8 to 12. And that in 2017, a group of faculty members, I was part of them, a group of about a dozen leading faculty members in the School of Engineering, wrote a document called Brown School of Engineering, Rebuilding the Foundation. And we wrote, engineering at Rice University, long considered the heart of the institution, is in grave danger of rapid decline if immediate and broad action is not taken to address faculty to student ratio and declining physical plant. Because during this period, there was, in the engineering quad, there has been no investment. And these proposals calculated, it was a very detailed proposal, and said there have been underinvestment of $500 million in the Brown School of Engineering. You can find this document today on my webpage. What was the response to the Rebuilding the Foundations document? The formal response from Allen Center was a thundering silence. There was no rebuttal, and informally I heard through the grapevine that Allen Center essentially agreed with the analysis. It took a couple of years because there was some authorized growth in computer science, and computer science where much of the growth engineering has been. And finally, now we have two new buildings. One is we just I think dedicated one building, Maxwell Hall. The other one is being built. So that's clearly a major improvement, but I have seen no serious need assessment. Where does School of Engineering stand now? What are its needs? And I think it's time to take this document from 2017 and do a serious, not some rogue assessment like it was done then, but the school itself should do an assessment and see where does it stand in terms of needs. So again, I want to remind you, the campaign, the Centennial campaign was described by the Vice President for Development then as centrally driven, and this is a manifestation of that. I want to contrast this with a document that, again, Melissa King posted recently on her blog, this document from 1964, and this is where Rice decided to embark on growth. And the specificity of this, of the plan is, to me, it would be quite impressive. Increase the faculty from 225 to almost 400, include the student body from 2,300 to 4,000, double the budget, and so on and so forth. I have not seen such a very detailed and specific plan for a very, very, very long time. I know that under George Rapp, there was so-called the enhancement plan. I have not been able to get a copy of it. So a plan for growth, I have not seen one in a long time. I will quote a Chinese proverb. If you want 1 year of prosperity, grow grain. If you want 10 years of prosperity, grow trees. If you want 100 years of prosperity, grow people. We need to remember that. We need to grow faculty. We need to grow faculty. I want to go back to enhancing research and scholarship. So one thing that was not mentioned by Mr. Ladd was the Rice-Baylor College of Medicine merger. Not mentioned. It was an oblique reference, and Mr. Ladd wrote, David never hesitated to explore bold opportunity. The Houston Chronicle described the Rice-BCA merger as a colossal failure. I can give a whole hour-long talk about the Rice-Baylor merger. But I think the important issue is to say, what was the driving motivation? And as far as I can tell, the driving motivation, as in fact was told us at the time, is to quote from the vision for the second century, where one of the, I think the very first bullet was, we must visibly and substantially increase our commitment to our research mission and raise our research and scholarship profile. So the reason, the rationale for the merger was to increase our research and scholarship profile. But faculty and deans were not consulted. The faculty remained skeptical, and they viewed the move as reckless rather than bold. Ultimately, the merger did not fail because of the faculty, it failed because of execution. And again, that's a whole other long story. What was missing there was a plan to enhance research and scholarship at Rice. So following the collapse of the merger, here is something I couldn't resist showing this picture. The merger was meant to be a shortcut for glory, but on the road to success, there are no shortcuts. I think this picture said it very nicely. Following the collapse of the merger, the Senate formed a research group, which I chaired, on research and scholarship. The title was Enhancing Research and Scholarship at Rice University. A group of about 13 faculty members, leading faculty members, developed this document. And the focus here, again, it was not an analysis of research funding or endowment. It was really looking at processes and structures designed to support and improve Rice's research and scholarship effort, including strategy, support, assessment, and so on and so forth. The report pointed out that there was a self-deprecating quote that has been floating at Rice for many years. Rice is perpetually perched on the precipice of greatness. We have great ambition, but somehow we have not been successfully deliver on that ambition. The working group went more deeply into what is the next level, and to say if we're top 20 school in undergraduate education, we should be a top 20 school in graduate education. I know there is some talk about Rice moving to the top 10. Right now, in my opinion, it's a pipe dream. The report came out, but there was no serious follow-up. That was interesting. I was invited to give talk about this report all over the world, from Brazil to Russia. And every time people ask me at the end after my talk, so what did Rice do? And I have to tell them, no serious follow-up at Rice, no serious follow-up at Rice. And to me, one of the very, very central question, and maybe the central question of this talk is, what does Rice want? What does Rice want? And I'll start with some anecdotes. In 2015, I was a director of the Kenken Institute for Information Technology, or as we call it, K2I. And we were asked to conduct an external review. And we did conduct an external review, and we had a distinguished panel of computer scientists from around the country come and visited. We did a self-study, we did an internal review, a self-study. At the end, a panel of distinguished computer scientists came and they wrote a report. And the central finding are the mission from the expectation from Rice are unclear. In fact, they were just very surprised to learn that Rice launched a data science initiative whose proposal was developed by the Kenken Institute, and yet the Kenken Institute played no clear role in this initiative. They issued a report, we wrote a response, the Committee on Research wrote a response. What was done? I'm afraid nothing much. Another external review, this one a couple of years earlier by the office, for the tech transfer office. And they brought a panel of tech transfer officers from around the country that are from universities, have reputable tech transfer offices. And again, they wrote a review. And again, they wrote, I won't read the whole paragraph, they wrote TTO appears to lack specific expectations, goals, and overall vision from the university as to how to fulfill their stated mission. What was the follow-up to that report? As far as I can tell, none. Entrepreneurship at Rice. You know, it reminds me of Mark Twain. Mark Twain said, quitting smoking is very easy. I've done it about 50 times. Everybody at Rice does entrepreneurship. The Rice Alliance, the Lilly Lab, Allspark, Arcel does entrepreneurship. We have a tech transfer office. Now we have the ION. So I've heard that one idea, and when people want to engage with Rice on entrepreneurship, the answer is, it's whom do we engage with? Who at Rice speaks for entrepreneurship? What does Rice want? And so I hear that one solution is to have yet another vice provost for innovation. I'm not saying it's a good idea or a bad idea, but it won't be successful unless we figure out what does Rice want? What does Rice want? To me, the question, what does Rice want? It's a very, very central question. In fact, the centennial address was concluded with the sentence, we must be Rice. But it just begs the question, what does Rice want? The working group asked the following question. What is the proper balance between a research university with a strong undergraduate program and undergraduate institution with a strong research program? What are we? What is the proper balance between being a technical college that many people think as Rice and a liberal art college? What do we want to be? What is the proper balance between science and engineering that was traditionally the strength of Rice and humanities and social science? So the vision in 1964, the plan that I flashed to you on the screen for 1964 was for Rice to become a balanced research university. And we've made tremendous progress, but we never fully lived up to this. We've never been able to bring humanities and social science to the same level as science and engineering. And we need to decide if that is this something we want or not. But as evidence for that, let's do a very quick comparison between Rice, we are 16 on the US News and World Report, and brown 14. At least maybe they just came up with a new one, so this may have changed a bit. If you compare them, brown is about 1/3 larger in terms of faculty members. But I look at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, because it has members from both science and engineering and humanity and social science, as well as other civic leaders and the like. But when you look at academics, Rice has 26 members, Brown 105. Now Brown is bigger and Brown is much older than Rice, and these numbers are from the very beginning. So I don't want to say that Brown is doing much better than Rice. But at Brown, about 50% of the members are in humanities and social science. And at Rice, it's 2 out of 26. So our humanities and social science, I argue, we have not been able to develop them to the level of science and engineering. Do we want to? Do we don't want to? What does Rice want? Even the issue about undergraduate education on one hand and focus on research on the other hand. As I said, what is the proper balance between them? Our mission statement says Elysian Research University with a distinctive commitment to undergraduate education. I don't know what is distinctive commitment, but I would ask, do we have distinctive commitment also to graduate education? I hear that there are still somehow debates on the board about the importance of graduate education. Well, Rice could be an undergraduate institution, or it could be a research university. What does Rice want? We should decide, what do we want? Now, in particular, I want to take a closer look. Remember that the press release about the growth said that we will use it to strategically grow the faculty. So let's see what happened in the faculty between 2004 and 2020. These are the best number I could gather. Not so easy always to find numbers at Rice. Engineering has grown by about 50%. Humanities essentially flat. Social science, 50%. Natural science, 10%. Business, 50%. Architecture, flat. Music, 50%. Is there a strategy? Maybe there is a strategy, but no strategy I've ever heard. What does Rice wants to be? What do these numbers tell us about what Rice wants to be? One way to look at it is Rice wants to be more applied, and that's fundamental. I mean, you look at science and humanities and the fact that both have stagnated. What does Rice wants to do? Again, the working group on research and scholarship said the faculty administration and the board of trustees together should develop a coherent plan for the size, distribution by intellectual area, and demographic of the faculty at 5, 10, 20 years. That does not exist. We just recently passed it. We just accepted Rice to have undergraduate business major. What impact will it have on our student body? What impact will it have on the faculty? As far as I could see the discussion in the Senate, these very important questions were never really deeply discussed. I want to mention something else that was not mentioned in Mr. Ladd's email, and this is the Bioscience Research Collaborative. So the purpose of the BRC was to provide an innovative physical and programmatic environment where scientists and educators collaborate to conduct bio-related research. This is a bit vague. I remember what was the essence of the BRC proposal was to have a locus for Rice TMC collaborations, not to have scientists and educators collaborate, was a locus for Rice TMC collaborations. And it's widely accepted on campus that the BRC did not live up to its Rice TMC collaborative promise. Why? I have never seen any official post-mortem. Why did this beautiful vision, I thought it was an impressive vision, why did it fail? I think it goes back to the same question. What does Rice want? Was the focus on a programmatic initiative or on a real estate deal? Paraphrasing Benjamin Franklin, I think we end up having neither. Here is another area where I ask, what does Rice want? Again, we go back to, it's easy to quit smoking. We've done it, I've done it about 50 times. We have an Institute for Environmental Energy Systems. We shut it down in 2008 during the financial crisis. Then we had Energy and Environmental Initiative. It fizzled out and the director was sent packing. Now we have Energy and Natural Resources Initiative. I think we are bedeviled by the same question. What do we want? Do we know what we want? Is it a programmatic initiative? Is it industrial funding? I want to contrast what happened at Stanford. Well, in May 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, they announced a new school, and they wrote a school focused on climate and sustainability will amplify Stanford's impact. Well, we're in Houston. Are we going to be forever beholden to the energy industry? The funding from them, big funding from them has never come. And I want to go back to the ION. Again, just like the BRC that I thought was a great idea, I think the ION is a great idea. Now here is from the webpage, the ION fosters community and culture where corporate, innovator, academic partners, community partners, startup, entrepreneurs come together to solve some of the world's greatest problems. But cui bono, who benefits? Whom do we want to benefit? The world? Houston, Rice, the third world? There are major concerns about the impact of gentrification on the third world. And we've heard conflicting statements. And I'm concerned that without a very clear focus, what do we want? The ION, there is a risk of the ION failing, just like the BRC failed. And I want to talk about culture, because culture is incredibly important when you talk about institutions. As I told you, I interviewed about 25 people to prepare this lecture. And one of them told me, your talk will be discounted because you're controversial. So I'm a controversial. I don't think it's my mustache. I think because I speak my mind. I think because I give talks like this. But when Ned Thomas was a dean here, he talked like me, and he told me, you talk like an MIT faculty member. And I took it as a compliment. I think MIT is an institution we can learn a lot from. I left IBM and I came to Rice, and I had about 20-year engagement, consulting engagements with Intel. And I learned about the Intel culture. Intel has a culture called constructive confrontation. Constructive confrontation. They call it disagree and commit. They call it a method of avoiding the consensus trap, in which the lack of consensus leads to inaction. Civility and collegiality, I believe, are consistent with dissent. But at Rice, civility and collegiality suppress serious discussions. I want to go back to this issue of the admin-driven university. Remember that we saw that compensation has increased significantly among the administrative layers of the university. If we want to learn how to build a great university, you go back to a classical book by R.S. Lowen, 1997, Creating the Cold War University, the transformation of Stanford, how Stanford went from a gentleman finishing school to a powerhouse research university. And the crux was a strong provost. Fred Terman built Rice University as a strong research university. Let's compare it to Rice. During the 2010, we had two very, very questionable provostial appointments. And these were accompanied by a pattern of weakening the provost office. The budget was taken out of the provost office. IT was taken out of the provost office. Online education was taken out of the provost office. In fact, I heard that recently, even approval for faculty hiring was moved to the president's office. And the reality is, I'm going to be blunt, in most universities, the provost is first among equal VPs. That's not the case at Rice. If you ask people at Rice, who are the executive vice presidents, everybody will say vice president for administration and vice president for finance. So if we want to start to build a strong research university to enhance research scholarship at Rice, this will not be done by the VPA. This will not be done by the VPF. It must be done by the provost. So we have to start asking ourselves, why is the provost office at Rice so weak? And a weak provost office translates to a budget process that is not centered in the academic side of the administration. So I have seen very little discussion at Rice about alignment between budget and strategic academic priorities. For example, is graduate education a priority? How is it reflected in a budget? And the working group again addressed it, and they wrote, RISE should rethink its budget process to allow for longer term planning, a broader strategic discussion of priorities and trade-off, a closer alignment with strategic priorities, and enhanced flexibility and incentive for academic unit at all levels. What was the follow-up? None. I want to talk a little bit about shared governance. So again, I mentioned the agency dilemma before. Another important management principle is called the centrality fallacy. And this is the definition, the assumption that you are in a central position, you presume if something serious were happening, you would know about it. And since you do not know about it, it is not happening. When I worked at Intel, I spent almost 20 summers at Intel. And Intel, there are no offices, cubicles. Everybody has a cubicle. All the way from the engineer to the CEO, everybody sits in a cubicle. And this was instituted by Andy Grove to try to combat the centrality fallacy, to make sure there is flow of information from engineers all the way to the CEO. In higher education, the antidote to the centrality fallacy is shared governance, because shared governance means that we have a better and a shared understanding of complex problem involving many shared stakeholders. There's a huge ensemble of intellect on campus and is not being taken advantage of. The faculty is weaker. I said 35% now, about a third are entities. We have a search, we have a presidential search. In previous presidential searches, there was election for faculty representation on the search committee. This time there were none. It is striking that there is no faculty member for humanities on the presidential search committee. When you talk to people, when I talk to many people about shared governance at RISE, the phrase I've heard many times is a theater of consultation. And people even start to remember fondly the faculty council, because they said there were more faculty involvement in university matter then than there is now. RISE has no faculty to board communication. Somehow it's viewed as not kosher. When during the merger, I wrote to the chairman of the board, and I proposed that we meet so he can hear the faculty view of the merger, about the merger. And he wrote to me a 2-page letter saying why it's inappropriate. I don't think it's inappropriate. In many, it should not be done willy-nilly, but in many schools, there is a formal channel for faculty board communication in order for the board to get more information. In fact, during the merger, the president appointed the faculty advisory committee by passing the Senate. The Senate responded by appointing a faculty manager review committee. Was Senate appointed, and they wrote a very good report. And I want to contrast what happened just about a year ago. The faculty passed a resolution. The faculty of Rice University expressed its deep disappointment that in spite of the stated principle of choice, some faculty and staff members felt under pressure to be physically present on campus. But the Academic Restart Committee was chaired by the Speaker of the Senate. So this is, to me, this is stunning. The faculty passed a resolution rebuking the Senate. I think this is really something for us to take a very, very hard look at. The faculty passed a resolution rebuking the Senate. And I want to try to close it by talking about issue of leadership ambiguity on campus. So the campaign was concluded around the centennial campaign was concluded in around 2013. And then there was immediately conversation about a third capital campaign. And this time we wanted to be not centrally driven. So there was a Blue Sky initiative started by Science and Engineering. The provost office started a lift process. Many people may have forgotten. I had to dig this webpage from the internet archive, from the Wayback Machine, leading innovations of faculty thoughts. At RISE, this website has been deleted. And there was reports and presentations, very small number of follow-ups, but the silent campaign went sub-silent. I hear nothing about it anymore. Nobody's asking us about needs. And in fact, in 2019, the Vice President of Development left RISE. But the situation is more serious than that. University president, they serve at the pleasure of the board, but there are expectations, and the standard term for university president is 8 to 10 years running one campaign. And while we are discussing the third campaign and doing Lyft and Blue Sky, there were persistent rumors about the president interviewing in other institutions. So it was a period, a very strange period of ambiguity, not clear what was going on. We only recently learned from the president that in 2018, he was offered final 4 years, but nobody knew about it. So we had a long period of lack of clarity about leadership at Rice. And leadership is the most important job of the Board of Trustees. And I think the Board of Trustees needs to examine this and ask itself what happened and make sure it does not happen again in the future. I want to conclude, I know we are out of time. I want to conclude by talking for a few minutes about Rice's mission. So here is the current mission statement. As a leading research university with a distinctive commitment to undergraduate education, again, this distinctive commitment, Rice University aspires to path-breaking research, unsurpassed teaching, and contribution to the betterment of the world. I think this is wrong. Contribution to the betterment of the world is not a third leg. It is a raison d'etre of universities. I think the end should be placed for the betterment of the world. Betterment of the world is a literal translation from Tikkun Olam, which is a very classical Jewish value. The president of Ireland, President Higgins, wrote very beautifully, I won't read the whole quote, but it starts, universities are both a part from and part of society. In the final sentence, with the privilege to pursue knowledge comes a civic responsibility to engage and put that knowledge to work in the service of humanities. I completely agree with President Higgins. Rice's tagline, very often we know the tagline is unconventional wisdom, but that is part of a longer sentence. Rice is a community of curious thinkers, passionate dreamers, energetic doers who believe that improving the world demands more than bold thought and brave action. It takes unconventional wisdom. I don't know why the focus was put here on unconventional wisdom. The focus should be improving the world. In fact, my preferred tagline would have been research education for the public good. I want to conclude. This is a quote that in this conversation I got from one of my colleagues, and it's a long quote, so I won't read the whole thing, but it starts, Rice has gotten stronger through the years, is unremarkable with rich and graduate education given the resources available. But at this point in time, it has to decide to move forward with research, even taking some risk, or else it will fall back. I will say it somewhat less eloquently. Rice has tremendous potential, but to go forward and upward, Rice must answer honestly 3 questions. What does we must be Rice mean? Where is Rice today? Where does Rice wants to go? There's a phrase that I heard at Rice is the breadth of our ambition knows no bound. But I have a problem with this, the breadth of our mission knows no bound, because I think that being strategic means not only deciding what to do, but also deciding what not to do. It means weighing trade-offs, means identifying our comparative advantages and leveraging them. I will conclude here, and I'll leave you this picture of Pablo Casals to ponder. And at this point, we can, I'll stop sharing the screen. And now I will open the floor to, we are just a few minutes late. I'll open the door to questions. I see there are some questions on the Q&A, and Joe can read us some questions.
First, let me say thank you very much, Moshe, for an excellent talk. It's always very informative. I've decided to adopt a tradition we have in computer science here. I've opened up the chat for everyone, so if you would like to thank Moshe, you're welcome to type thank you in the chat right now to thank him for a very nice presentation. You're also welcome to actually put in more questions in the Q&A here. We'll try to go through them fairly quickly. While we're waiting for that, Moshe, you wanted to say a little bit about the video recording for the talk. I remember you mentioned you wanted to say something.
So the talk has been recorded. I think it's important to have a record of this, but I know this is a very critical lecture, so I decided not to publish it. I will share it with people of the Rice community, people who registered for this. But my plan is, at least in the foreseeable future, I will not publish it.
All right, I do have some questions that have been queued up here, and I'm going to actually jump to one of the later ones because I found it very interesting in here. And it's the question, basically the comment to start, is a 20-year plus trustee at CMU and a recent vice chair of the board of trustees. I believe that among the most important relationships I have are with senior faculty and deans. Yes, my relationship with the president and the senior administration is important, but I can't for a moment think it's inappropriate for me to talk with the faculty. And then there was a follow-up comment that says, what a wonderful talk, Moshe. So maybe you want to comment on communication between the faculty and board.
So I have to say that the protocol at Rice is normally not to approach the board, and I followed it, but I've been sometimes, against my controversial reputation of speaking my mind, has reached out, and some board members have approached me, and we have had some good conversations. So I think, and I said there was another occasion where the board got a close look, and that happened under Ned Thomas. So this happened somewhere around probably 2015 or 14, 15. I think the provost at the time, Joe McClendon, asked him to review all departments in the School of Engineering and then the school itself. And Ned said, well, at MIT, board members have on this review committee. Can I do it also here? And McClendon, I'm not sure how much he thought about it. He said, sure, why not? And so we had board members on departmental review committees, and they got a very close to reality view. I mean, the risk for a board is if they only hear from the administration, then they hear only one side of the story. I'm not saying the administration necessarily.
I've actually promoted the person who made the comment here, Edward Frank. Edward, if you would like to make any follow-up comments, feel free to talk if you'd like.
Yeah, I will, because hi, Moshe. Thank you for inviting me to listen to this. And I'm glad I took the opportunity to do it. Moshe and I know each other from serving on some NAE stuff together. I'd go further. So I'm on the board of trustees at CMU, as you know, but I'm also on 3 major public company boards. I mean, multi-$10 billion a year market cap company kind of things. And in every board I'm on, we are talking to not just the administration, not just the CEO, not just the senior VPs, but indeed, rank and file engineers. So I think from a governance point of view, and this is really the issue, every board is focused on improving governance, this whole ESG thing. I would say, and it's a little unfair to me to say this, that a board that says we don't think it's appropriate to talk to faculty or students or whatever is a board that is not practicing good governance. I mean, my favorite part of being a board member at Carnegie Mellon is when we meet with the students, and there's some self-selection that goes on. We don't always get to talk to, the students who complain, but we get a good picture at least of what student life is like and what problems students are having. Same with faculty. So I think if the board at Rice really thinks it should only talk to the administration, it is not well governed. Unfair of me to say because I don't know a lot about it, but that would be my sense.
We have a lot of questions here, so bear with me kind of as a moderator's prerogative. First, we have somebody on one of the panelists that would like to. James, would you like to go ahead and unmute yourself? I've enabled video too. If you'd like to turn it on, you're welcome to ask a question.
There's Jim Pomerantz here. Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Yes, I can hear you.
I just wanted to interject a little reaction to that last comment. A lot of what happens in the communication between the board and, say, the deans depends on the president. There was a president at Rice University who mandated to all the deans, and I was one of those deans at that time, that all communications between deans and board members be documented in writing and sent to the president. The trustees at the time did not know this. They learned it during the presidential search in 2003. End of comment.
Well, I also know of a situation at Rice where a dean was very frank with the academic affair committee of the board and later was rebuked for being so frank. Any other questions, Joe, from the,
Oh, yes,
Q&A?
we have more here.
Yep.
Why don't we go on for a couple more minutes? We do have a few more questions on here. Let me find this question here. I think this was a good question. An anonymous attendee basically stated, Carnegie Mellon is similar to Rice in some respects, small, private, great undergrads, tech focused. Differs in one important aspect. Instead of nourishing its endowment, CMU puts it to good use to build and sustain top-ranked PhD programs across several fields. Should Rice have ambitions to become a leading research university?
So I partly came to Rice because I thought Rice has an ambition to be a leading research university. And my central point is, in fact, not to tell Rice you should do X or Y. More importantly, Rice should decide what does it want to be. Rice could say, we intend to be an undergraduate institution with a strong research program, okay? That's a legitimate decision. There is a room for such institutions. I think many faculty members in this case would say, that's not where I came to be. Maybe other people will come to that. The most important thing is this ambiguity means that we are not have strategically focused. Mentioning CMU, Rice has this unbounded ambition to do everything. CMU is not. CMU is very, very focused, okay? They have a small number of schools which are number one, they are near the top, very like the School of Computer Science at CMU is near the top in the country because they have made a strategic decision to invest in computer science. And I believe that also in the arts, they have a very, very strong school of art or visual art or dramatic art. I don't remember exactly. But the point is, what does Rice want?
Let me see. Deborah Harder had her hand raised from the attendees. Deborah, I'm going to ask you to unmute if you would like to ask your question.
Yeah.
Moshe, thank you. Thank you so much for a really well presented talk. And I have just a couple of questions. One of them, I love your notion of the need for a more balanced university, one that pays attention both to science and engineering and humanities and social sciences. And yet, inevitably, whenever we have very impressive reports like the one you've given, the details, the numbers are all coming from science and engineering, and one wonders whether there is not just a need to know what we want, but to develop some ways to begin to talk to each other more effectively. I would also say one small thing about Brockman Hall. You mentioned it, that's the opera hall that is a very big investment for a small amount of money. But those voices, the voices of those singers are huge. And the audiences that will hear those voices will be huge. And I think that once again, there's a small misunderstanding of what the humanistic has most to offer as opposed to the scientific. And finally, Moshe, am I wrong during the Baylor merger discussions, when you and I spoke a great deal, and I was the speaker at the time, it was my impression that it was the engineers who were most opposed to the merger, and yet in your presentation today, it seemed as though that was not the case, and that we had missed an opportunity. Anyway, those are my three comments following a truly impressive talk that will open up great conversations, I know, among all of us. Thank you, Moshe.
Thank you, Deborah. So you've asked actually several questions, and I don't know that I can answer all of them. I did not mean to imply now that I think the merger was a good idea. I did not think at the time it was a good idea, and I do not think now it was a good idea. I think there could have been a way to reconfigure it in a very different way. For example, at the time it was promised to be a very tight marriage between Rice and Baylor.
Mm-hmm.
To somehow magically all this collaboration will flourish, which I, was very clear was always a pipe dream. Imagine instead we say we're going to have a very loose coalition. The purpose to do it is only for kind of corporate thing, but rights will exist here as it is, no change, and
Yes.
Baylor will be there. And over the years, we will explore what is the relationship. It would have been a different story. I mean, we can go for a long time to talk about what could have been in the merger, but I said I viewed the merger as was convinced as a shortcut. And you saw in my picture what was the outcome of the shortcut to success.
I'm going to jump in as moderator here, so we don't go on forever.
Let's go on to another.
We had one other person, Sergio Capusta, which has asked multiple questions in the Q&A and raised his hand. So Sergio, you're going to have the honor of last questions. I apologize to everybody else. A lot of good questions, but we can't get to them all.
Just as a comment, that I would welcome continuing conversation. You know how to reach me. If you want to agree with me or disagree with me or ask questions, just reach out to me by email.
Okay, great.
Sergio, you have the last question.
Yeah, it's an honor to ask a question to Moshe. I know him very well, and I agree with almost everything that he said. I just have a comment. Maybe, Moshe, you can comment on my comment. The comment is, it's not just a question of numbers of faculty and tenure, non-tenure track. It's a question that I believe the faculty body at MIT, Brown, or Stanford is qualitatively different from the type of faculty that we hire at Rice, or that we create by culture and everything else. What I mean is, I have not seen that many faculty at Rice are interested in changing the world. And this is, well, it seems to have, they have other interests like tenure and growing the lab. But if you ask faculty at Brown or Stanford or MIT, they know exactly that they come to those institutions to change the world. They want to have an impact which is much bigger than themselves. What's your comment?
So I know that many faculty members at Rice over the years found the tagline "unconventional wisdom" as unsavory. I mean, you don't go. In fact, look around faculty and look at their business cards. It rarely says PhD. I mean, it's just not some. Being brag about smart you are tells everybody you're not smart. Okay, and especially we're living today very clearly in a very, I don't want strong word, but very challenged society with huge societal challenges that we have in this country. And when I told people about my tagline, rich education for the public good, I have to say, everybody tells me, again, this was not a formal survey, it was very anecdotal, but everybody tell me it's a great tagline. And we start to say, this is your basic value. We are a private university, but even private universities are all public in some sense. They're depending on the public for their existence. And therefore, we should view everything we do. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody is going to go to and work in a soup kitchen. But ultimately, the reason for universities is to contribute to the public good. Education contribute to public good. Research contribute to public good, but it behooves us to go further and think, how can we contribute to the public good? I think it's a decision that we need to make as a community to make this value integral to us.
Okay, all right. I think we're basically 20 minutes over, so I think this is a good point to kind of end the formal part of the talk. Again, I want to thank you very much, Moshe. Excellent talk. The chat actually has quite a bit of discussion in it right now. A lot of people are wanting you to come give the talk at this talk at their university also there. So we're going to leave it on there so people can read the chat. I'm going to back off this moderator. If people raise their hand, I will promote you to panelist. You're welcome to stay, and as long as Moshe wants to talk.
Let's do the following. If people want to stay, promote them for panelists, and I'm happy to have a conversation.
I'm going to step out as moderator, and I'm going to basically, anybody who raises their hand, I will promote to panelist. You're welcome to sit and discuss with Moshe as long as you feel he's got the energy.
Free for all.
Okay. So here, just be patient with me and I will start promoting people up to talk.
Hello?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm working hard here.
Okay, we will start with Jose.
Hi, Moshe. That was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. And I think what's dear to my heart, I want to make a comment is about the Baylor and connections to the medical center. As I noticed for a long time, the connections we have when they are natural, basically, if you have a science overlap, we have many, many connections and they have been very fruitful for us. But I think, like you all point out, these things are not made from top down. It's a question of which are the natural connections, and maybe that things would be much better from the beginning. Now I want to put the real question that you raised is, if we don't change this fact that people in academia influence the financial decisions, basically all the power ends on the hands of the VPA and of the VPF, are we going to be able to solve the problem at large? Is that something there's a chance to be changed? You have been here for much longer than I have, but appears they have that too much power with no academic knowledge to actually help to make that a great research university.
So in some sense, the ultimate audience for this lecture, in my opinion, is going to be the next president. If the next president, and I will make sure the next president, that's why one reason I'm recording this talk, the next president will receive a copy of this talk. And this person may decide or not to take action. I mean, the decision on how, many of these questions ultimately are how to run, for example, even how to run Allen Center.
So has everybody at one point has done a study at large of the Rice budget and decide basically how to reshape it during the last 10 years, or there are lots of pieces that are just kept there automatically?
So how to, this is a big question. How to run the budget is a very, very central issue. And this is something that Rice needs to decide. And again, this will be a decision has to be done by the next president, how to make budgetary decision. And right now, it's a mystery for us. There are some universities where there is a budget committee. The Senate has a budget committee, and they don't make budgetary decision, but they give advice. They have an advisory role. At Rice, somehow thought, oh my goodness, if faculty members are going to see numbers, oh my goodness, what will happen? But to me, I always ask, what do they have to hide? And Sally Keller McNulty, who was somewhat controversial as a dean, but during her term as a dean, the financial crisis happened. Everybody had to cut painfully. And the way, I give her tremendous credit, the way she dealt with it was, she decided to open her office budget to the chairs. Here is the budget of my office. And everybody can take a look and get involved in this conversation. And somehow Rice is just terrified to tell us about budget and numbers.
I want to jump in real quick and say hello to Sriram and Matthias. It's been a long time since I've talked to either of you. So it's great. They're members of the department from many years ago.
He's a member of the Rice community. Yes, Sriram.
Hey, Moshe, this is fantastic, of course. Hello, everyone. Rice alum. I'm now at Brown, so this hits particularly close. Moshe, at some level, I really appreciate the message here, which is, obviously you think as a verification person, you think in terms of like properties and what is the goal of a system rather than how it's currently implemented, an idea that I learned from you. And I think you carry that across very nicely in the talk. Like, what does Rice want is basically, what is our spec, right? But the part I disagreed with your talk was, and Brown, as I said, this feels very personal because Brown wrestles with the same kind of question. Are we a research university with a strong undergrad program, or are we an undergrad institution with a research component? And we keep having this flip-flop too. And over the years, I've come to feel like this is sort of a false dichotomy, right? We are neither Michigan, nor are we, Amherst or whatever. Right? And maybe there's only 10 or 12 of our institutions, but I think we are actually a different kind of institution. For a person who wants this kind of institution, it's a phenomenal place there may be small number of those people, and trying to turn us into one of those other two kinds of places is actually a significant loss. We are maybe a different model entirely. I'd like your thoughts on that. Thank you.
So I think we can be both. I think you can be a strong research institution and you can be a strong undergraduate institution. I think you can be both, but you need to sit down and say, okay, what does it mean? Where do I put my priority? Where does the money go? Remember, at the end of the day, one of the most important things is where does the money go? Because institutions are run at the end by money makes the world go round. Where does the money go? And so you need to make a decision. You know, if you just talk, oh, this is value, this is important, but you are not put your money where your mouth is. We're saying graduate education is very important. Well, I have no idea when you try to look, you know, when you try to look at the money, where, you know, how much investment are we making in graduate education? As I said, notice that while the faculty grew by 30%, and most of this growth was by entities who are paid less than faculty, total compensation, which Rice reports to the IRS, grew by, in real dollar, by 60%. Where does the money go?
Yep, that makes sense.
Fred.
Yeah, I would like to return to something that you seem to hint at toward the end or briefly touched on, but I think it's very relevant for Rice. You know, when you're small, if you're going to punch above your weight, so to speak, you have to make tough choices. If you look at countries that are small but punch well above their weight, I would argue, in science, let's say, that's the perspective I come at this from. Obviously, you know one of those countries very well yourself, but I also spent about 15 plus years in another one, which I would say punches above its weight, the Netherlands.
I consider myself to be small, but punches above his weight.
Yeah, but as a country, I'm saying, you know, Israel certainly is
Yeah.
one of those countries that stands out. But the Netherlands is actually one that I have a little bit more direct experience with. And you know, if you look at how they do that, I would argue that they're one of the successes is they're willing to make tough choices. You don't necessarily try to do everything well. You focus on your strengths, and you are willing to invest more in them and make tough choices. And I think that's something that is relevant to the Rice context.
Absolutely, absolutely. When I hear the breadth of our ambition knows no bound, I said, this is a recipe for mediocrity.
Yeah.
This is like, what is it, the Greek mythology, but making everybody equal and chopping the long people and stretching the short people. Decide, you know, you have to make some tough choices. You have to make some tough choices as an institution. CMU has done it very well. They have some areas in which they are nationally strong, and some areas in what they say is, we do not do that. And Rice is having a hard time with making these are tough decisions, because you have to say no to some people. And, you know, some people will say, but if you do that, I will leave. And the answer is, we'll be sorry to see you go, but this is the decision. This is also what we call, remember this idea of disagree and commit. Lots of discussions, but then once a decision is made, everybody has to follow up.
Yeah. Thanks for the great talk.
Yeah. Christine.
I didn't really have a specific question for you. I just wanted to be promoted in case one came up while the opportunity was arose. But
Okay.
Wonderful talk. I really appreciated
Thank
it.
you. Lower your hand on Zoom. Okay. Matt. Okay.
Sorry, I just lowered.
Okay.
Yeah, as
else?
non-tenured, I'll save my questions and comments for privacy.
Okay. Jose, you can. I think we have a look. You can lower your.
I think I lowered my hands.
Click on reaction and click lower hands.
I did already.
Okay, your hand is stuck up there. Okay, that's not a problem.
Let's try again.
Okay.
Did it lower now?
No, it's up. It went for a second down and then it came back.
I don't know.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Jim.
Yes, I thought I'd throw in one. The normal path for deciding what a school is going to be when it grows up these days is strategic planning. And you mentioned that several times, including the famous Bill Gordon report. And I think you said correctly that that was the last really serious effort at strategic planning, but there have been others. So I served on Malcolm Gillis's strategic planning committee at Rice in 1993 through 95 as a dean. And then I moved to Brown University, which you're talking about a lot. And I ran strategic planning for Brown in 1996 and 97. A lot of things happened both at Rice and at Brown after their strategic plans were completed. But what happened had little to do with the roadmap that was laid out in those strategic plans. And that's something to think about. Sometimes the administration doesn't like what appears in a strategic plan, and sometimes they will drag things out, keep the planning committee working, then they'll appoint a evaluation committee to evaluate the plan, then they'll drag that out, then they'll produce a implementation committee to figure out how to implement the plan and then evaluate that. And by the time all those steps have been completed, it's time to start over again because everything's out of date. So there is an alternative to strategic planning, and it's just called just keep doing the next best thing, the next right thing.
Well,
and that has the advantage that it keeps an institution nimble. But I do agree we need to start a self-study, a serious, honest self-study, and then have that lead into a well thought out strategic plan, and then do something about the problem you keep flagging, Moshe, of nothing coming from these really, really lengthy and labor-intensive planning efforts.
So I think in my opinion, it's a mistake to put a faculty committee and says, do a strategic planning. Because a plan like that, and I said the important thing about a plan like that has to be, if it's really plan with teeth, it says we are going to emphasize X and we'll put our money there. We are going to stop doing that because we don't think we should continue to invest in that. Or sometimes you decide we're going to let that thing just muddle along. I mean, I think I'll go, and for example, I think President Leebron did one decision that I think was very wise. There was this controversy about athletics, and it's clearly a topic in which it's impossible to reach consensus because there are hard opinions on the two sides of this. So he said, okay, you guys continue, but the Rice subsidy is going to be ceilinged. It's going to be bounded. And if you want to succeed, then all the big supporters put your money up. Okay. So sometimes you decide on something, we let it muddle along. It's a strategic decision, but you cannot ask the mistake. I think often asking faculty committee to do that. I think a real strategic plan must involve the administration and must involve the board, and there must be a decision at the highest level that this is going to be something that we are going at the end. Once the decision is adopted, what does adopted mean? At the end, strategic plan of university is adopted by the board of trustees. It's a strategic plan of the university. And then it's about governance issue. They have to make sure that it's executed. But very often I wrote once a column on the futile ritual of academic unit review. We review and nobody wants to do anything because change is hard. We have to remember there is a wonderful cartoon that I saw. I saw a politician there is a rally, and the politician asked, who wants change? And everybody raised their hand, we want change. And then the politician asked, who wants to change? And people said, no, we don't want to change. We don't want to change. Matthias.
Moshe, it's wonderful to hear your analysis. As you know, I moved from a really cool place, Rice, to what I call sometimes a dump in 2001, a university that wasn't one, that had decided, however, 2 or 3 years before that, to become a research university from basically a teaching university in the Boston area. And the initial decision came from the highest place, a strategic commitment to say, let's grow. And the way they did it is, of course, very different from what you seem to be thinking, not a strategic plan in the sense of, we will hire the following areas and we will not hire in the other areas. Instead, they said, here is about a dozen endowed chairs by the trustees. Go hire people who can attract more people. And they went forth, and it was just, growth was by coincidence. As somebody said before, I forgot, one of the previous speakers, I think, said, you just hire effective people, and suddenly something happens. And then about 10 years later, I've got a new president, and we made a strategic plan involving the faculty, administrators, and I think the board too. And now we're just as mediocre as everybody else. So I think it's very effective to have the strategy of saying, here's a competition among all colleges. You get more endowed professorships if you get endowed professors that didn't have any before. If you can attract good people, and they attract more people, like Rice people, like Alan Missler, for example, our current dean now, and you may remember him.
Yep.
But then the second phase, the next 10 years, was really just like strategic planning. And as far as I'm concerned, it all went wrong. And I will send you a long email on what went wrong.
Yeah. Look.
But be careful what you ask for. If you ask for growth, for bigger numbers, you will get bigger numbers, but not the right.
No. But deciding to have a competition is a strategy. I mean, you could decide.
Yeah, I agree.
You could decide that the way we're going to do this, instead of centrally deciding who is going to grow, okay, we're going to decide there is a pot of money for growth, okay, but it's going to be competitive, and there's going to be a high bar, okay. You need to work it out very carefully. It's the problem with this, of course, it creates contention and people try to avoid it. But it's a model for growth, okay? It's a strategic way to decide to do that. Strategy does not necessarily mean to say, we'll invest more in science, we'll invest more in humanities, okay? Strategy could be like the Weizmann Institute is very famous. We don't hire in area. And it's one of the top research institutions in the world. And they refuse to hire by area. We say we only hire by excellence. So they have, for example, the Department of Computer Science that many people find very skewed. It's just almost the Department of Complexity Theory. But they say we're a research institution. Everybody here is outstanding. That's our model. This is a strategic decision.
Right.
So when I'm saying strategy, it does not mean, I tell you what it doesn't mean. We are going to become a top 20 school. That's not a strategy. Okay. This is wishful thinking. Okay. Now I hear that some people try to talk about we will be a top 10 schools. As far as I know, none of the top 10 schools plans to step down. So to me, this is not a strategy.
We agree.
Aditya, my student, have a question.
Hi, Moshe. You touched on the topic of diversity, and we hear about diversity in student body, even faculty. But has there been any question about diversity of the board of trustees? Like, how do we compare it to other universities? And can you shed some light on that?
So I know, I'm not privy to conversation on the board. The board is self-appointed. I know it's an issue for ICE, and I know it's an issue for many other today, almost any public body, even private bodies that have boards. There is a concern about diversity of boards. How well Rice is doing compared to other places, that's a good question. It requires some analysis. I have not done this analysis. But I know that this is very much on their mind on the board as they self-appoint, as they appoint new board members. I know it's very much on their mind. More than that, we'll have to ask. And numbers, actually, all in some sense, the board composition is publicly available. You're just on the website, so you could go and compare Rice with other institutions.
Thank you.
Sergio, you have another question? I see your hand is still up.
Yeah, no, I just brought it up again. I like
Yes.
the comment that you just made about Weizmann Institute hiring talent and not hiring knowledge. They say, okay, we hire the best, and they're all good, and something good is going to happen. I don't have experience in hiring faculty. I do have extensive experience in hire PhDs for industry. And that was also my philosophy, is we hire for talent and we train for knowledge. So first you put the people that are good, and they're going to do something good. And in university, it seems that has been delegated to the departments, and so it's very hard that you will have a strategy like you want a university-wide strategy when the hiring and the progression is made at the lower level, at the level of the department.
Universities are complex organization. they are centralized, they are distributed, you know, who makes decision. We have to allow for this, you know, basically one of the way it happens at Weizmann is this decision are ultimately enforced by the institution. I forget what it is called. I think it's called the Committee of Seven. There's a committee of 7 members that make promotion decisions. So all promotion decision, Rice has a promotion tenure committee. And I think there is a committee there which is chaired by, I believe, by the president. And that's how basically, you know, department, you can say you can hire whoever you want, but we decide at the end who's going to get tenure. And so this decision is enforced by the tenure process that is run centrally.
Okay.
So there is a way to do that. I mean, in fact, one of the things that in the working group we wrote about, if you want to raise the level of faculty at Rice, is to make, you know, ultimately the president makes at Rice tenure decisions. Promotion tenure committee does not make recommendations. They vote on a histogram on a scale of 1 to 10, if I remember. And on each candidate, the president gets the histogram of the votes. Yeah. And the president at the Rice could decide to raise the bar on tenure, for example.
Moshe, just one fast comment here. First of all, I like the Weizmann model. I have worked a lot with Dan on that, and I have lots of people that have stayed in my group that are now at Weizmann, and I think it's a great model. So based on that, do you want to tell us what kind of person do we need as a president?
I think we need a president. Most important to me, if I look at the end of the day, what is the most, if you have to summarize my talk with one question, it will be, what does Rice want? As institution, we've been, fumbling around, to some extent. And so we need a president who, first of all, understands universities deeply and can come to Rice and lead the process that we ultimately as a community, we come to some conclusion. What is it we want? And it means it's you have the faculty, they have to be part of it in some sense. There is the board, there are alums, someone who is going to be able to be a leader and try to help us in converging. What do we want? What does Rice want? That I would say is that, to me, that's the most important thing for the president, is to help us reach an agreement. What do we want? Let's say it's kind of getting late.
Shriram,
you have one final question, one more question, Shriram?
Oh, no, I shouldn't ask the last question.
Okay.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Okay. So, Heather, do you know how can we keep a record of the chat and the Q&A?
Yes, it automatically. Let me make sure the chat. Yes, the Q&A, I believe, is automatic.
Here, I'm going to click the save chat button real quick here. Just
save chat, and we should save the Q&A. And as I said, I would welcome further conversation. Jose, you have one final question? Okay, then I think thank you all for.
Thanks again, Moshe.
Thank you for attending the talk. Thank you for the questions, for the conversation, and let's see whether this takes us somewhere. I hope it does. I hope it does.
Thank you, Moshe.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Heather, I'm going to email you the text.
Heather, why don't you stay for a minute? Just you,
Yes.
maybe Joe and Heather and I can stay for a minute.
Here real quick, so make sure we get all the thing.
Yeah.
I have the chat saved in text file, Heather. I will send it to you.
Oh, perfect.
I don't know how to save the Q&A. I'm not familiar with.
Can we just, let me open, I haven't opened them because I was focused on people.
Yeah, why don't you open it, Moshe, and you
I
can
am just
it.
going, okay, I don't think you can save it, but what I'm going to try to do is just copy them.
Okay.
And
so
I can
Heather,
copy
I
them.
will right now, I will send you a message.
I will copy them.
So I have
I will copy them one by one. So
I have the text file for the chat, and I'll send that to you. Good job, Moshe. It seems like you got a pretty good audience, pretty good turnout in there. And I don't think you offended anybody to.
Yeah, I said I was trying to be critical, but not offensive. So
It came across that way. Absolutely.
Yeah,
was
I
good.
think you were okay. Was the guy the first guy that I asked, was he a member of the board currently? I couldn't tell.
who is that? Who is that?
The guy was he's asked one of the questions. His name was
Edward
Frank.
Edward Frank is a member of the board of trustees at CMU.
Okay.
Guys, and we do still have an audience.
Yes, I saw that on there. I'm gonna, in fact, I'm gonna ask them to leave because I have a couple of questions I want to ask. So Deborah,
Yeah.
I warn you, I'm going to boot you here.
Yes, oh, hold on. I moved to a slightly more comfortable chair. I'm sorry, what did you just say?
I'm going to boot you, Deborah. We're still recording, and so you can stop the recording, by the way, if you want, Heather. It's perfectly fine to stop the recording, but I'm going to go ahead and boot the remainder of the audience real quick here.
Yeah,
Okay.
bye. Thank you, Deborah.
Sorry.
Thank
Okay,
you.
the recording stopped.
Okay, I'm going to